Welcome back. The very first time I heard the saying that's in Ezekiel 18:1, I wondered what it meant. It was during a prayer meeting, I remember, at church. And the pastor said, "Oh, no longer will the fathers eat sour grapes and the children's teeth be set on edge." And I was like, what does this even mean? But now I understand, or I understood before then, but now I got a clearer understanding that God was affirming his justice to the people through Ezekiel, letting them know that the children won't be punished for the sins of the father. Now remember that in the beginning, in Deuteronomy and all the times when God was still establishing them as a nation, it was something that he said would happen. But he lets Israel know that he will judge each one according to their ways and begs them to repent to avoid death, as the soul that sins will surely die. While God doesn't punish us for the sins of our family members, right? Sometimes modeled behavior can be transferred from from parents to their children or throughout like a family lineage and cause us to make poor choices or exhibit unhealthy patterns. We must remember that although we may be impacted by our family's proclivities, we are not responsible or condemned for the wrongdoing of our parents. The same way that we are not saved, we are not condemned by our parents' sins, we're also not saved by our parents' godly acts. Everyone is accountable to God for their own action. I think we would all do well to remember this, that yes, our teeth may not be set on edge by the sour grapes that our parents ate. However, we must make a conscious effort to break negative patterns and just make sure that you are right with God, because as the word says, the soul that sins will die, regardless of the root or where it comes from. God lets us know that righteous living is the way that we demonstrate his character to the people around us. This is the evidence of our faith in God. So as Christians, we are called to like higher standards. Ezekiel's lament in chapter 19 references Judah as the lioness and the vine. The cub that was raised, captured, and taken to Egypt most likely referred to King Jehoahaz, the fourth final king of Israel, of Judah. He was the hope unfulfilled, as we know about Jehoahaz. And so another cub was raised, and that was King Zedekiah. But he got taken to Babylon and put into prison. We all know how Zedekiah ended up. Remember that Judah was the chosen tribe from which the Messiah was going to come. But at the time, they just knew that they were chosen and set apart, right? Because of God's promise to David. So it must have been such a defeat, like this should have just been so disappointing. And it would have been like, we are the chosen tribe. Why are we going through this? But yeah. As a vine, Judah grows tall and strong and gets turned into a ruler's scepter, which is eventually burned by fire. The elders came back to inquire of God after the last time when he said he won't respond to them, but only to tell them about their idolatry if they didn't repent. Well, guess what? They didn't repent and they still came back. In chapter 20, he recounts the faithfulness to them and highlights their continued rebellion from generation after generation. God expected obedience from them, but actually got the opposite. But being the awesome God that he is, even after not letting them inquire of him, and I think, at the end of the day, it was like, oh, why didn't he let them require? I think that letting them inquire of him would have just been the same cycle. They would inquire, he would tell them, and they still wouldn't listen and still go back to their, disobedience and their hardened hearts. So I don't think that's why he didn't even bother. He reminded them that after his judgment came restoration. Notice how he always just brings back this restoration. I told you, God is that's one thing that's coming to. God is very, very keen on restoration. Like it's never just the end but with judgment. And here's what I learned about him apart from that. God gave the law to the Israelites to let them see that they couldn't keep it by themselves. They couldn't keep it in their own power. It was impotent to save them because the law doesn't lead to life. Instead, it leads to death. And instead, it reveals our shortcomings and our brokenness in the face of such a righteous God. But God gave us life through his grace and mercy. And Ezekiel 20:44 actually represents that. Trying to keep the law wasn't the path to righteousness. The only path to righteousness is the way, the truth, and the light, and the life. That is Jesus Christ. And he brought the gospel. That's the good news. And was the only one who was able to keep the law perfectly. So that law that the Lord gave to the Israel, he knew they weren't going to be able to keep it. And they should have known they couldn't keep it, so they needed him. But now we have Jesus, who came and paid our debts for us and saved us and has adopted us into God's family. How amazing is this? I for one know that every time I read, like the Old Testament or hear sermons or teachings about the law, I was like, there was no way that I would have been able to keep these laws. So I'm very grateful for Jesus paying that sacrifice for me and giving me right standing to God through his sacrifice on the cross. And I hope you are too. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we'll continue Ezekiel 21-22, and I cannot wait to share with you. See you here. Have a good day. Bye and God bless you.